Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second virtual No Name reading. We're really excited to have you. This is a reading series that is brought to you by the graduate students in the English department at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Tonight, we have Phillip Howells, Rosemary Sekora, and Caleb Petersen. Kate Gaskin was going to be joining us, but unfortunately she can't make it. But we are going to read a few of her poems at the end, just so we can still have her poetic presence here a little bit. So we're really excited to have you all. Thank you so much for joining us, especially those of you who are in school and coming to the end of a semester that has felt both infinitely long and also, how is it November? Like, seriously, someone tell me. So we really appreciate you taking the time to be here, and hopefully this will be a small moment of peace and calm and joy in your day, in your week. So I'm not going to take up too much more of your time right at the top of this. Our first reader is going to be Rosemary Sekora. So I will let Katie, who is my co-host today, Katie's going to rearrange our screens a little bit, so it's just me and Rosemary, and then I will introduce her. So Rosemary Sekora is an MA student in creative writing. She holds a Bachelor of Journalism, also from the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and she's currently the publicity manager at the University of Nebraska Press. We're so happy to have you here, Katie. Rosemary, good Lord. And yeah, everybody please welcome Rosemary.
Thanks, Jessica. I just want to say thanks to the No Name series for inviting me tonight. It's a real privilege. And also thanks to Katie for putting this together. And it's a pleasure to read with a couple poets tonight later, Caleb and Phillip. So it was great to be in their company. Tonight I'm going to read the beginning of a short story that I'm working on. So it's going to kind of end abruptly, but we will take it away. It's called The Lies We're Told. I pushed my nose onto the glass that was scratched so I could get a better look at her. She came from another place, maybe another time, but I desperately wanted to see her and have her see that I was here and that I cared for her. Her name was Penny, and she was the only female polar bear at the Denver Zoo, according to my teacher, Miss Natalie. With my face still pressed against the glass, I stared at Penny, her mound of dirty fur moving slightly up and slightly down, and then again. She was always sleeping when I visited. I put my right hand on the glass and moved my pointer finger as if tapping the glass, but I made no sound. You weren't supposed to tap the glass or feed the animals. Come along, everyone. The black bear is roaming about in his enclosure, so we can see him in action. Miss Natalie ushered the class to the next viewing area, but I stayed where I was. I didn't care about the black bear. I was here to see Penny. But her big body stayed put. Even with all my might, I willed her to get up and walk around, to play with a red rubber ball floating in the small pool, to look at me only for a moment, but nothing, still sleeping. Zachary, Miss Natalie said, with a stern but not too loud voice. Come over here, please. We don't want to lose you. I turned to look at Miss Natalie, never moving my hand off the glass. I looked back at Penny, my sad white lump, napping, all alone. She can't be happy here, can she? Zachary, now. I whispered goodbye to Penny and slowly joined the other students in my class. I stood next to Isaac, who I didn't like very much. He always smelled like peas and wet grass. We watched the black bear walk across his enclosure, back and forth from one side to the next, back and forth. The next day in class, we talked about zoology, but I didn't want to be someone who studied the behavior and origins of animals. I didn't even want to be a veterinarian. All I wanted to do was make sure that Penny could have a happy life, and there was no way that was possible if she was at the zoo. Zachary, do you know the answer? I looked up from my drawing to Miss Natalie, and 14 other faces and wooden desks turned to look back at me, only a couple of them wanting to actually answer the question. I mumbled as I looked back down at my paper, which now had a lovely drawing of Penny, best as I could, which was way better than Marie's turtle she was drawing next to me. She was terrible at drawing. Is it 7? 7. Miss Natalie was not impressed. Zachary, we are talking about the type of ecosystems bears live in, not numbers. The class laughed quietly. Like that awful zoo, is that one of the answers? I couldn't explain it, but the tears were welling up in my eyes. I looked up at Miss Natalie and back down at Penny in my notebook. It was as if she was looking at me, disappointed that I didn't know the answer. There were giggles from the corner of the room. My desk was in the middle of the last row. I looked back up at Miss Natalie. I'm sorry. Zachary. She saw my wet eyes and sighed. Go to the principal's office, please. I picked up my notebook and pencil and left everything else behind. It was still morning, and there was a lot of school left in the day. I pulled the door open and walked into the office. Mrs. Brown, the school secretary, was on the phone with someone. She looked up at me and pointed at the wooden bench with wildcats painted across the third panel in the seat. The way Mrs. Brown moved her head when she talked looked as if her hair would fall out of place, but it always stayed in the same spot. Those short gray curls never, ever moved. As I sat on the bench, awaiting my fate, I thought about Penny. I remember what Isaac said that day at the zoo. She's boring. But Isaac didn't know any better. He didn't know that she was suffering in her small habitat, longing for the Arctic ice against her padded paws, the taste of fresh seal in her mouth, and another polar bear's company. Probably. Zachary, he's ready for you now. I was pulled out of my thoughts and walked into Mr. Black's office. I sat down and waited. Mr. Black was writing on a yellow notepad. So, Zachary, how are you today? He stopped writing, capped the pen, set it down on his desk. His silver watch reflected the sunlight coming from the window behind him, so bright it hurt to look at. Fine, I said. What's the matter today? Is Billy trying to catch the squirrel outside again? Or maybe Elise is stepping on the ant farm out by the swings? He didn't seem concerned, though, so I felt like I could tell him what was really going on. No, it's not that. It's Penny. Penny? Who's Penny? Do we have a new girl in class? Have a bit of crush on her? Mr. Black winked at me, leaned back in his chair, patting down the wrinkles in his white button-up shirt. No, the polar bear at the zoo, Penny. I don't know why I expected him to know about Penny. I guess I thought more grown-ups would know zoo animals by name. They seem to all remember our names. Ah, right. Okay, well, what about her? He leaned forward. I don't think it's fair she's in that cage by herself, I said in my most confident voice. Isn't it technically an enclosure, not a cage? Yes, enclosure. I knew that. I always say the wrong thing when I'm upset. He went on to tell me not to worry, and that Penny was better off at the zoo than she would be in the wild, that the wild had other predators who would come after her, like global warming. But then he said not to tell anyone he said that. After school, my parents and I were sitting at the kitchen table. I was working on homework, Dad was cooking, Mom was typing on her laptop. Mom, I decided to break the silence. What do you think about polar bears? Well, I don't know. They seem like nice bears. Aren't they really vicious? My dad said with his back turned to us, stirring something on the stove. I told them about Penny and how she wasn't vicious and how she needed me to save her. Then we ate spaghetti. The next weekend, we decided we were going to go to the zoo so Mom and Dad could meet Penny, so I spent the whole week brainstorming how to break her out of there. Every day after school, I drew her enclosure, and thought about different plans for breaking her out. A lot of options involved befriending one of the zookeepers, explaining Penny's situation, I can be pretty persuasive. It's how I got Santa to bring my dad a new bike last year. So I wasn't worried about convincing people. I just needed to get to them first. On Friday at school, I decided to tell Marie. She was the only one in class that I thought would understand. And that's where I'll end that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosemary. That was so wonderful. I feel like someone told you that I love stories about zoo animals. So I feel satisfied. Our next reader is going to be Phillip Howells. Hi, Phil. Phillip Howells is a PhD student in literary studies. His research focuses include science fiction, digital humanities, critical theory, and cultural studies. By following an interdisciplinary career trajectory, I cannot forgive you for putting that phrase in here. It took me like 3 times practicing it to get it right, and I still messed it up. So by following that, he has also been able to dabble in the creative writing world, writing short stories, drama, and poetry. The poems he'll be reading have not been published and were part of a project manuscript put together for Professor Hope Wabuke's poetry workshop in the spring of 2020. Please help me in welcoming Phil Howells.
Career trajectory brought me here. I just want to say how honored I am to be a part of the reading series. It's really cool to be here with the other readers that are going on tonight, and I'm just going to go ahead and launch into it because I just think it's really cool that I was invited, and that's great. So I have a handful of poems that I'm going to read, and the first one is called Western Pennsylvania. More than just coal dust and old racism, but certainly not less. We are a land of concrete and rebar, spread out over rolling hills and the corpses of forests. More than just hard hats and cold beds, we are lost daughters in the backyard, calling out to God, but not too loudly in case someone should come looking. More than just slots and numbers, we are a members-only gambling night held by the Booster Club at the PTA meeting, and the school board always wins. More than just or unjust, we are complicated by our pasts and our futures, and as we OD and lick shots and fade away, we will warm our hands by the seam under Centralia, awaiting that wet, cold snuff. The second poem I'm going to read is called My Second Roommate. It's part of a 4-poem series that I've sort of tinkered with for the project for Hope's class. And it's about roommates that I've had psychotic breaks in the past. So it's very personal to me. My second roommate. I cannot read your thoughts. This is only a poem about sometimes we think the same thought at the same time, evidence that we are meant to be here in this house at this time, a coalescence of political frustration and drugs, a sort of thinning out of understanding, so that when you tell me that the bed is facing the wrong window and the people driving by too fast to see in are staring at you while you sleep, like a nightmare in waking, I can tell you to slow down. Stop stealing my smoke and sit with me a minute so I can show you how absolutely beautiful your mind has become. 2, love is. Love is a many-legged beast with too many knees that turn at odd angles and scratch with bristles the soft underbelly of the earth, living down below the surface of our insecure home bodies. It moves weirdly, wildly, stabbing and scrabbling and clinging to places it should never go. A mind of its own, but collectively fleshy, it likes to say that it lives in our hearts. But we know the truth, as we know many lies, that the cognitive consciousness maintains itself electronically, even if chemicals are all that we have. It sticks in our heads, like a smell or a short chorus, substantial without substance. They say, don't bury your dying before they're dead. Colloquial wisdom would have you wait and water their souls with your waiting. And watch your waiting self to make sure you're not waiting too impatiently or obsequiously. Just wait until the perfect moment. Take your shovel in hand and dig a hole for yourself while you're down there. This is called Electric Ocean. My mother told me never to mix electricity and water. Perhaps that is why I hate my brain. Distilled empathy does nothing to conduct my thoughts. I am my impurities. I move as through fluid, the motions of myself arcing between air and water, but dimmer and less exciting waves, caught blue and purple, made gray in the air, and then white, yellow, and blue. Creatures, afraid farther under, boil brightly in the neon deep. Of my brain sitting in the ocean bottom, under a swirling dervish of well-lit unalertness, only a beachhead in the deep black, crushing me quietly, without the sound and smell of burning diodes. Eels and undulations ripple, sparkling through the dark, sign postings and advertisements with their bodies and their minds impossible to ignore, too dangerous to believe. The currents run through me yet, carry me farther still, as I sizzle and swish through liquid. Currency calls me back. My imagination is zapped. A shark sniffing blood shares my thoughts electronically. Which is worse, hell or purgatory? Purgatory is temporary in the biblical sense that eventually, if enough saints on earth pray for you, you can move beyond it. But if we are to believe St. Peter, then one day there may be as 1,000 years here. Which is worse, vice or versa? Sometimes I think the dangled promise of cold light is more cruel than an eternal ice bath. And this will be the final poem that I'm reading tonight. It's called Suicidalist's Communion. Selah, the psalmist said, regarding the feeling he could not put into words longer and more pointy. I too gasped the ephemera, phantasmagorical chimeras, climbing the chiaroscuric darkness in the streets and settling our hearts to the unified beat of futility. No one ever dies. We consume each other as we consume ourselves. Every breath a purchase, every step a conscious choice to participate in the world's largest tango, ever enlarging and becoming clumsier with each new drink. I will die intoxicated. This is my body. Break it in remembrance of me. This is my blood. Drink all of it in remembrance of me. I am examined and most worthy of damnation. Take, eat. Do this in remembrance of me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Phil. Phil is also cut from the same Western Pennsylvania cloth as I am, so I'm always happy to hear those Pennsylvania poems. Also really great to hear things that, I've read before but haven't heard out loud. So our next reader is Caleb Petersen. There he is. Caleb Petersen is a first-year master's student at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln with a focus in creative writing, specializing in poetry. He received his BA in theology from Colorado Christian University. Really excited to hear some poems from him tonight. Please join me in welcoming Caleb.
Thank you so much. This is my first ever poetry reading, so am I muted now? Okay. Hello everyone, and I'm excited to read. I am super thankful for the opportunity, and I hope you enjoy the poems. The first one that I'm going to read is called Cool Kids. Pretend you're cool for the night. Hang out on the windowsill, draping stick and poke thighs outside as the 80s street lamp nostalgically wafts a cigarette in a cold breath. Quiet and beautiful and spooky. The dream of surrealist French patterings, tapping the ash off the end to feather frozen in darkness beneath. The world of rom-comic ramen noodles, slurping takeout, crisscross applesauce without enough furniture to host. Pretend on Halloween you're classy cognac, ascot to their askance. Dress up like you're the poet your friend talks about, transported to Paris so the twin bed and the fire escape is for lack of space. Dress up like love for the night and dream that it's real. Welcome the ghost, friendly through the window, and laugh the room won't smell like smoke, and pretend a hipster air where love is the haunting, the jump scare, black cat screeching, what was that monster, on the bed. Make a movie to romance a suburban bike boy. Drink PBR on the kitchen floor. Choose what you have and call it cool. Call it love. Call it real. The next poem that I have is called Standing Is. Standing is. The neighbor crossing the street, holding plastic grocery bags, knocking perpetually against his knees, drawing a red line in the palm of his hand that used to hold onto easier things, wearing sweatpants beneath shorts to keep his legs warm, placing used tennis shoes hanging on to unsteady feet around shards of glass on the sidewalk that's become his necessity. And all this while also carrying me. The next poem that I want to read is called All Saints Day, and it is basically All Saints Day is the Christian holiday where you celebrate saints who have passed and unnamed saints, and so that's what the title refers to there. We celebrate saints in old Italian hills, in aged pages of unearthed wisdom. Litany all these beloveds back to me. Litany the hills, litany the earth. Repetition my knee-bent wish, a communal mailbox of sacrilege. Paint my neighbors in cathedrals. Record the names of the people on your block and hold on to every inflection like liturgy. Row homes a prayer. Outside, they've walked out of their hidden monasteries in the hills, walked off the page to take the trash out. Requiem, the living, cherish the homily on the weather, pass the peace with a wave. All of these people are saints. The next poem I want to read is called 3 a.m. at the Village Inn. I ran into my neighbor and we talked about the night shift at Village Inn, how everybody knows it's the worst, how while I'm waking up, he's forearm flexed at the stove, scraping off all the grease, how it feels like one of those pieces of litter rolling scrappily across the street, how scraping by is the way wind blows the leaves, how windows open when the heat starts to leave, how some people never open their windows, how some people wave but no one actually crosses the street except for all of this plastic and leaves. We talked about how an anklet won't let him leave except to cook for 3 a.m. teens, but still how good it is to sit on the porch and flip through the breeze. How living is sitting on curbs and listening to cars rumble by as they breathe, as we breathe. And the last poem that I'm going to read for you is called Nahant. But I want to, before I read it, just thank you for the chance to read. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Yeah, I really appreciate it. Okay, this one's called Nahant. When my grandpa got sick, I went to Boston to live with him and Grandma, and on Saturdays, she and I would walk up and down Nahant Beach while he read in the car. We'd find a place to sit and watch the sandpipers scurry, back and forth, like micro-league soccer. Beaches in Massachusetts aren't like Miami or San Diego. There's more wool and wind-red cheeks. There's more strolling with hands stuffed in pockets. There's no boardwalk selling t-shirts printed in store. There's no bronze yams riding cruiser bikes with lapdogs and baskets. You don't have to pay for parking. One time while walking, I asked her if she thought people were meant to work, regardless of passion. We sat on a bench and she inquisitively asked, "Well, what do you think?" On the beach, you walk in a straight line and pray it go on forever. On the beach, a question can float in the air for forever. I recently moved to Lincoln, and sometimes while walking down the street, I try to feel like I'm on the beach. I pray for a cold wind, for consistency, but my bare feet crunch over acorns and dried leaves. Neighborhood walks always end. You make turns intentionally, internally circling back to your starting point. Each step encounters a square, a plan, someone else's plan. Sidewalks and streets are laid and they breed order. You need a job. On the beach, you can watch the earth create more or less of itself. You dig your feet into the sand as if you're laying down roots. Grandpa's last time seeing the ocean was at Nahant Beach. A stranger took our photo in the parking lot. Streets remind me of city council meetings, which are just people who don't have time for me. There's no time for anything. The morning he passed, a storm swell had come up the coast, so I went to Nahant and surfed in his memory. And just the other day, I saw the roots of a tree bubbling over the curb like a wave flowing into the street. And then I realized there's a forever under there. And if you walk long enough, you'll walk forever somewhere. Thank you.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Caleb. That last poem was wonderful. And it's so great to hear your work. Thank you so much to all of our readers tonight. I wish we were all in a bookstore right now drinking warm drinks and getting to see each other and hug each other. But this works too. This is nice too. So as I said at the beginning, Kate Gaskin unfortunately couldn't join us tonight, but we do want to read a few of her poems before we leave. So my co-host Katie Maria has graciously volunteered to do that. But before she does, I just want to give a little bit of an introduction to Kate, not Katie. That could get confusing, right? So Kate Gaskin is the author of Forever War, which was the winner of the 2018 Pamet River Prize from Yes Yes Books. She is a recipient of a Tennessee Williams Scholarship in Poetry from the Sewanee Writers Conference, as well as a fellowship from the Vermont Studio Center. Currently, she edits poetry for the Adroit Journal. And I just wanted to give a plug for her book, Forever War. Isn't it beautiful, right? So definitely go get a copy if you can. YesYesBooks.com, I believe, is their website. And yeah, Katie is going to join us and read a few poems.
Thanks, Jess. Yeah, so I'm Katie. I'm a PhD student here, and it's been me on the back end of the no name tweeting. I'm not tweeting, typing lines that I liked. I'm not speaking for No Name collectively is what I'm trying to say. But these are Kate Gaskin's poems. I'm just going to read 3 of them that Jess and I selected from the beginning, middle, and end of her manuscript, Forever War. Please go buy it. And the first one is called After a While, The Monsters. There were days when trees pulled up their roots, curled in their leaves, whitened with blight, and left only dirt-churned ruts dragging out from the yard. All color paled from the crabgrass, and aphids left the garden, one by one. Even termites ceased their endless chewing. We threw bed sheets over the tables, blew out the candles, rolled up the rugs, and closed the curtains against the night. Tell me, when this is over, will all that's left for us to suffer flee with winter, render itself toothless in the light? And this second one by Kate Gaskin from Forever War, which you should go buy right after this, is called What Will Come to Pass. In the future, water will meet sky until each pale-faced house drowns beneath the mirror of itself. Roaches will huddle in the bottoms of empty boats, and blooms of jellyfish will boil to the sea. Do you remember the little yard eaten by clover and wisteria? How, when thickets of Conradina flowered, their buds opened into tiny hearts, like purple rooms with purple tongues that beat into our hands. Let us say we'll stay in the palm of this gray world, just this once okay with the risen water, at peace with what we have to lose, feigning open branches from the forest, releasing the bottle blue hours, the sun upon us, like a warm egg, breaking open into yolk. And this is the poem that the book takes its title from, Forever War. And yeah, I just want to say thanks to all the readers and to Kate for allowing us to read her poems, even though she couldn't be here. And we will be up and running next spring. I think Jess is going to say this. I don't know why I'm doing this. Okay, I'm going to read this poem by Kate Gaskin from her book, Forever War. Forever War. Because we can be undone by routine violence, because you call this conflict the forever war, because history is a needle quilting itself to the same thirsty bedrock my white ancestors claimed, there is only, in the end, the matter of our shared complicity. I am no better, with no finger on a trigger, than any other colonizer. And you, with your immigrant mother, and the bombs you loaded onto Jeannie Leavitt's plane, are only one man among many telling the same lie. That air power can suture the musculature of war, shut for good. Can this ever be undone? Now drones, now the same Groundhog Day of special ops humping across dry lands most Americans could never name. You are gone in your plane over the Tigris again, and here there is only Nebraska and wind, my insufficient hands, the dumb and bloody language of the tongue I cannot shed.
Oh, sorry, we're laughing back end confusion. Thank you so much, Katie, for reading those poems. It was also great to hear your voice. I think, let's bring everybody back onto screen. so that we can give everyone one last round of virtual applause before we depart. So thank you so much to our readers, Rosemary, Caleb, and Phil, and also Kate Gaskin from afar. You were all so wonderful. This has been such a treat to host and to listen to. And thank you so much, Katie, for handling all the screen swishy business. As Katie was saying, we will be back next semester with at least 2 readings, virtual again, unless, some miracle happens and we get to do these in person, which would be awesome. But we will definitely be back with a couple of readings. We don't have any dates set yet, but keep track of our Facebook page and our Twitter page. If you like any of those platforms, and we will post updates on there. Also, shout out to Jamaica and Jonathan, who hosted the last reading. It was, which, by the way, that is still available also, and this live reading will also be available to watch later on. So send it to your friends and family if they couldn't make it. But yeah, otherwise, thank you so much, y'all. It was so great to have you. Thanks for showing up, and we will see you next semester.